Hello, welcome to my studio. This is your instructor Linda, and this is part 2 of Video Workshop 7 on Fringe Quilling, Blending, and Nestling. So in this half of the video, we're going to be learning how to use the third type of fringe paper. Like the straight cut quilling paper, the connected fringe paper has two clean, straight edges. It's different, however, from a standard straight cut quilling strip because it has cuts in the middle of its body, like this. So this particular connected fringe is just plain straight cuts. In particular, this one has cuts that are 6 centimeters long that are 1 millimeter apart. You can get different designs of connected fringe paper of different lengths and separations. And you can also get connected fringe papers where the cuts are not straight like these ones, but are waved or zigzagged. For the purpose of this workshop, I'm only, however, going to be using the straight cut connected fringe. So let's start by prepping the connected fringe paper. The connected fringe paper comes in usually long strips like this, and you need to prep the paper and cut it to the chunks that you need. So let's take a look at this piece of connected fringe paper that I have in my hand here. You will notice on the edge of the paper that there is a thicker part here that doesn't have any cuts on it. Generally, this part of the connected fringe paper gets cut away and we don't use it. This is the residual and is left over after the paper is cut, as this is where the machine grips the paper. So let's begin by trimming that piece off. Like that. Most of the time when you're looking at the connected fringe paper, you will notice that the amount of extra paper on the side of the strip may not be the same. So what we want to do is we want to trim it so that there is no excess bulk on the edge of the paper. Now, how much do you leave? Well, it depends on how much of an edge you want. If you are needing a little bit more thickness so that you have room to attach it to your work, then certainly leave more. I find in most cases, if you leave about 3 millimeters off of the edge, that will usually serve most purposes. So here we go. Now, when you're working with connected fringe paper, it is important that you cut them into manageable chunks. I usually cut mine into chunks of about 2 to 3 inches. The reason why you don't want to use chunks that are too big is because it starts to get bulky, and when you roll, I'll show you what it looks like later, but when you roll, your paper starts to separate or stagger because of the diameter of the needle on the paper that is on the outside versus the inside. It'll become more clear once I start to roll it. So here we go. We've got the strip here that is prepped. All the bulk on the edge has been cut. The edge has been removed of all excess paper, and we have a piece that looks like this. Okay. So unless you're wanting to quill something like this, which has kind of kinked loops there, or kind of pointed loops, you need to do something called conditioning the paper. And when you condition the paper, what you're doing is you're adding a curved memory to the paper so that when you roll, instead of getting these folds here, that you get nice fluffy loops like that. So now, if you have purchased my connected fringe quilling kit through Etsy, it will come with one of these, and this is called a conditioning rod. If we take a look at the conditioning rod, you will notice that there is a small slit cut into one end of the rod. And if you flip it the other way, the slit on the other side is longer. So when you're using the conditioning rod, you want to make sure that the smaller slit is the one that you use as the cutting edge for conditioning the paper. What will happen if you use it backwards and you use the wider, longer side instead of the smaller size? Well, in most cases, nothing. When you're dealing with a piece of paper this small, the likelihood of you hitting the edge of the instrument is very low. The purpose of quilling with the smaller slit being the cutting edge versus the longer slit is for if you're needing to condition a longer piece of paper that is more likely to hit the edge of your instrument. By using the smaller side to condition the paper versus the longer side, when you're pulling the paper, you're less apt to tear or kink or break the paper if you use this edge, the smaller one, instead of the bigger one. So let me show you how to use it. You slide the paper through the slot and it'll come out the other side. Okay? Grip the paper on the edge like this and turn the rod. The more you turn the rod, the more aggressively you are conditioning the paper. Most times you will have to condition it twice because you will need to condition the little piece that you missed when you were holding the paper on this side. So here we go. Let's condition the paper. See, now it has a natural curve to it, like that. Okay? If you don't have one of these, you can condition your paper another way. It's nice to have this, but not absolutely essential. So this is a piece of foam that I took actually off of the packaging out of my cell phone, right? And to condition it using this piece of foam, you want to lay the paper onto the foam and use a heavy rod like this one here, or basically any cylindrical object that can essentially be used like a rolling pin. This one here happens to be a polymer rolling pin that I use for making my clay works, right? So nice and heavy. And what you want to do is you want to roll the paper just like a piece of dough. And here we go, we've got a conditioned strip. Okay. So once we've conditioned the strip, we can either roll the paper with the needle, or we can directly roll the paper onto a rod like this. So if you're making, for example, decorations to put inside your drinks at a party, you might want to use one of these. If you're putting it onto something where the stick will get in the way, say if you're doing it in a shadow box and you need it to be short, then you can quill with your needle. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to put that to the side. Now, when you're folding over the paper in order to roll it, you do want to make sure that the cuts on the paper are parallel or the same direction as the slot on your needle. So you don't want to fold the paper this way. You're not going to have much luck trying to roll the connected fringe paper if you fold it that way. So you want to fold it this way here. That is, see, parallel to the quilling needle. So I'm going to put the edge of this edge to edge, and I'm going to slide it into my needle. There we go. And I'm going to begin to roll. So like the other fringe strips that we've been quilling, you want to quill a tight coil, keeping in mind that the bottom of the paper needs to stay aligned like that. You may have to unroll the strip a little bit if you lose grip of your paper. Okay, so here's what it looks like after it's been rolled. There we go. So on the bottom of this strip here, you will see two pieces of paper. And there are two little flaps or ends to it because you folded your paper in half prior to rolling it. So when you're gluing down the paper, do make sure that you grab both pieces or glue both pieces down. Otherwise, your flower may pop open. Now, let's take a peek here. So after you've got it rolled together, you can tease the paper a little bit and move the coils to where you like it to be. Now, trying to demonstrate this while keeping it in the camera has made me quill this flower a little bit lopsided, but I guess you kind of get the point. It's supposed to look like this. Okay, so the connected fringe paper, other than making the, what I call the full blossom, can also make buds, like this one here. So when you're quilling this one and this one, it is basically the same technique with a very small difference. So how do you transform from this to this? It has to do with how you align your paper in the beginning. So if I fold this over and I align it so that the edges are exactly on edge to each other, then I get this. But what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to take the paper and I am going to pull it down. So if I was to show this, see, this paper is longer, this paper is shorter, right? So it is kind of staggered like that. So once the paper is staggered, I roll it pretty much the same way. Grab my other needle here. Grab it the same way, and when we roll it, there we go, the paper will automatically align itself so that it becomes a bud, like that. See? The only difference is in staggering the paper before you start, but it's rolled exactly the same way. Okay, there we go. Let's pull it off the needle. And if you got one of these quilling clamps, then you can clamp the flower and let it dry. Okay. All right. So this little flower here is done exactly like that one. It appears a little different because you've used a different size of connected fringe paper. In this one, I used a 6mm cut with cuts that are 1mm apart. This one here, I used a 4cm cut with the paper cut in 2mm strips. It looks slightly different. Rolled exactly the same way and finished exactly the same way. Okay? So I'm going to show you as well a technique to make these little things. They kind of remind me of the bulrushes that you see down at the swamps, right? So this one here is rolled pretty much like this one and like this one. But the difference is, rather than keeping the bottom of the paper aligned like you would in a tight coil, you are going to move down the needle as you quill it. So most of the time when I'm making one of these cat o' nine tails, I usually do it on a fixed rod. However, you can also make it on the extended needle if you need to remove the tip. So let's make one of these cat o' nine tails. I'm going to grab different paper. This one is 4mm with 2mm strips. Same thing, I'm going to cut away that excess bark on the side that we don't need. Snip, snip. Okay, and I'm going to trim the excess on the edge here as well. And there we go. I'm leaving about 3mm on the edge. You don't want to cut too close to these cut lines here, because the closer you get, the more likely you are to accidentally slip your hand and cut into these pieces. And once you cut into these pieces, then you've kind of ruined the strip a little bit. Okay, so exactly like the other ones, I'm going to use the conditioning rod. See, here's the one where the paper is a little bit bigger. It's going almost all the way to the edge of the conditioning rod. So when I use the smaller side versus the bigger side, if the edge of this hits on the edge of the rod, then less likely to get tearing. So let's turn it. See what I mean? Okay. Oops, slipped out of there. Back in. Okay. Let's go in. Okay, and likewise, you can also use the piece of foam, right? Okay, so remember, you don't want to fold it this way. You want to fold it this way so that the loops release straight like that. Okay. So if you're going to attach it directly to the rod, like this, I do recommend cutting a piece of tape. Now, I happen to have a roll of packing tape here because I can't find my regular tape, but packing tape works just as good as long as you cut it into smaller, more manageable pieces. So here we go. And when you're attaching the paper, you want to attach the paper so that it is onto the tape like that. And then you want to take this piece and you want to go a little bit lower on the tape like this so that the tape catches both sides. So if I turn it this way, you can see the tape is here and it is also catching this side here. And the reason you want to do that is so that the paper doesn't slide or move too much when you're rolling it on the rod. Okay? And you'll notice here that I left lots of excess tape here. And that is to get it so that it can attach onto this rod. So let's start by rolling this rod onto the extra piece of tape that I left. Okay? So here we go, and we roll. And once you start to roll, rather than keeping it straight and parallel like you would in this flower here, I'm going to start rolling so that we're going down this rod, moving our way down. See, moving the way down. And the faster you go down, the bigger the stagger between the different levels of the cat o' nine tail. So you can adjust the stagger according to your preference and what you want the cat o' nine tail to appear like. There we go. I got to the end of the paper. And once you get to the end of the paper, you can choose to either glue it down with your glue, or you can grab another piece of tape and you can tape it down. So in this case, I'm going to glue it. Now the important thing about using fringe paper is the fringe paper adds more pressure to your glue spot than the normal straight cut ones do. So you do want to make sure that the glue is completely dry before releasing the paper. Otherwise you're going to have your project kind of come apart and dislodge on you. Okay. So once you've got it basically sealed, then if you want, you can clean it up by adding a little bit of floral tape here, just to give it a more tidy plant-like look. Yeah. Very nice. So if you find that you want a longer cat o' nine tail, for example, then once you get to the end of the piece, then you can simply attach another piece here and continue to roll down till the plant is the length that you desire. Okay? So the other things that you can do as well too is you can embellish and add more to the flower. In the previous video, I made this here, which happens to be a foliage piece that I made out of the straight fringe, and I left a little hole there. And you can piece it together like such. And you can attach and glue the bottom to keep it together if that is satisfactory, right? So very useful combining all different types of connected fringe paper. Okay, so now that I've shown you how to use the connected fringe paper, I'm going to go over a type of technique called blending and nestling. Now, I have covered blending and nestling as well in the previous videos, but not to any great depth, so I'm going to cover it here. And one of the reasons why I want to cover it here is because blending and nestling lends itself very well to fringe quilling, and you can bring your fringe quilling up to the next level by doing blending and nestling. So what exactly is blending and nestling? Blending and nestling is when you're quilling with two strips of paper simultaneously. And depending on how much overlap there is on the paper, you can achieve a full blend, a partial blend, or a very small blend. So what is the difference between blending and nestling? Well, the difference between blending and nestling is very similar to comparing a square and a rectangle. So a square is a specific type of rectangle that has 4 equal sides. So all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So likewise, when you're using the blending and nestling technique, whenever you're blending, you're also nestling. But when you're nestling, you're not necessarily blending. Okay, so what exactly is it? So blending and nestling is when you have 2 strips of paper. And when you have these 2 strips of paper, you can overlap them like this, right? So in the previous videos where we were doing blending and nestling, we rolled the paper like such. And once we got to a certain desired point, we would take the second strip and we would nestle it under the first strip, between the needle and the paper. And then we would roll 2 pieces at once, like this. Okay? So when you're nestling 2 pieces of paper into each other, you are not necessarily blending, because if you're using the same color, then the appearance after you've nestled is exactly as if you had glued 2 pieces end to end and produced a single tight coil. So nestling is usually used when you are attaching multiple pieces of paper because you require a larger quilling element, right? And it saves you time because you don't have to glue. And not only that, because there isn't the bulk from the glue in between the 2 papers, you also get a much more clean and seamless tight coil, like this. Okay. So what is blending then? Blending specifically is when you're using 2 different colors. And by blending 2 different colors, you can achieve effects of modifying the color or creating elements where the inside and the outside of the element are 2 different colors. So if I was to show you a flower that I blended in the connected fringe, that would be this one here. So in this one, I have blended the blue and the orange, which creates a double-colored flower like this, as opposed to a single color. So in this particular blend, I did a full blend, meaning that the papers were exactly parallel to each other and one sitting on top of the other without any edge hanging off the side. So let me show you how I did this one. Okay, I'm going to grab a pink and I'm going to grab, let's grab a blue, right, like this. I'm going to cut about that much off of the pink there. Okay, going to trim the excess on the edge on the blue, like that. And I'm going to measure so that I get an equal amount of blue and pink. Okay. So in a full blend, you are putting the paper so it is stacked one on top of the other, like this. So full blend to get this. In this example, I'm going to do a partial blend as well. So I'm going to stagger the paper like such, so that you have some where it's only pink, some where it's only blue, and some where it's blended. Don't forget to condition the paper. So I'm going to show you this again, my handy dandy little trick for conditioning the paper if you don't have the conditioning rod. Like this. Okay. The nice thing about the conditioning rod is you can control how curved these papers are. Whereas if you're doing this way, it's a lot harder to get exactly the amount of curve that you want. Okay, so I'm going to do a partial blend. Let's do it overlapped like that. I'm going to fold it over. Okay. At this point, I'm going to grab the quilling needle, and I'm going to use a scrolling needle this time. Just cause, no reason, just decided I wanted to use the scrolling needle. Let's grab the end there. And like in the other one where I did the canto nine-tail on the rod, you don't have to do this on the quilling needle, of course. You can tape this directly to the stick and do it that way. So I'm going to roll. Do make sure that when you're blending that you are grabbing both strips of the paper. Rolling like that. Okay, so this blend looks a little bit different from the other blend because this one has only a partial blend as opposed to a complete blend. So if we look at this flower, here we go. We have a concentration of pink in the middle, a blend of pink and blue kind of in the central, and then just blue on the edge. And see how it's a little bit different? So complete blend in this one and a partial blend in that one. Okay. And let's see if I can glue this down. Generally, when you're quilling with these connected fringe papers, they're very springy. So you do have to make sure that you don't let go of your project, because then it basically explodes. Okay. Put some there. And then grab quilling clamp. Let's grab two. There we go. So here is the flower. Once you've got it affixed in place, of course, you can manipulate it with your hands to kind of fluff it up or get it to the shape that you want. Like that. Oh my goodness, I rolled this one very lopsided. Not my greatest work. There we go. Okay. Let's grab that. There we go. I keep wanting to tease this one a little bit more. You can play with it till it is the shape that you want. It's getting there. Okay, there we go. So when you're blending and nestling, you don't necessarily have to blend and nestle the same type of fringe paper neither. So here I blended two connected fringe papers. But let's see what happens when you connect two different types. So I'm going to take this connected fringe paper right here. Let's cut a chunk off. So we're going to blend and nestle two different types of fringe paper. When you're blending straight cut paper, especially if you're blending it in a tie coil, you can essentially create variable colors, right? If you blend a red and a yellow together, then the final result will give you something that looks kind of yellow and red and orange at the same time. It's very pretty. In one of my classes, I'll have to show you how it looks. So I'm going to condition this paper like such. Okay. You can see how if you use the conditioning rod, I can be quite aggressive about getting that nice curl in there. Right? You can also get a tighter curl doing it using this by finding something that has a very small diameter and, you know, pushing fairly aggressively. When you do that, though, you do have to be careful not to crush and kink your paper. Okay, so I've got that one there. And I'm going to grab this pink one here. So right now it is a connected fringe paper, but I am going to deliberately cut into the connected part and release it to create a straight fringe. So here we go. Is that about the right size? Oh, it's a little bit smaller. That's okay. Okay. Clean that up. Okay, so right now it is a connected fringe. If I cut into these pieces here, it has now gone to a straight fringe. So connected fringe, if you cut it, you can release it into a straight fringe. So now I'm going to fold it over. Okay, and in this one, instead of putting the edges edge to edge, I'm going to stagger it to get the bud. And while I'm staggering it, I am also going to put the straight fringe kind of on the back side here. Right? Let's grab my scrolling needle. Here we go. And now we've got a bud with what looks like thistles coming out of it. That's kind of neat, isn't it? Now, if the thistles are a little bit too long, you can go in and you can trim them, of course. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the purple thistle flowers. They kind of look like this. They've got little spikes in the flower. See? There we go. And let's glue this down. So there are many variations that you can do. You can be creative, mix up the colors, mix up the fringe types, and with blending and nestling, you can add more dynamic colors to it. There we go. Okay, so I think this covers my the workshop on the fringe flowers. Thank you for watching this video, and see you in the next. Thank you. Bye-bye.